Chapter 58. Love. Lens looked on in wide-eyed shock as the giant scorpion tore Silent Edge to literal pieces. Limbs went flying in a shower of gore and viscera as Silent's wings laid on the ground, having been ripped off already. The Pegasus's dying screams devolved into agonized whimpers, then pathetic gurgles, before his severed head fell to the wet, grassy ground with a deafening thump. Lens couldn't help but shudder, and forced himself to tear his eyes away from the gruesome scene, his stomach churning. Silent had been a monster, yes, there was no questioning that, and Lens couldn't say that the world wasn't better off without him in it. But to die in such a manner, especially at the hooves of a mere child. Lens timidly glanced back to the scene, and the scorpion was gone. Primrose the Earth Pony filly had returned, her face hidden by her long, blood-soaked mane. Her head was tilted up, as if to look at the sky, allowing rivulets of crimson to run down her body and stain the grass at her hooves. She didn't move. She just stood there, silent as the grave. Lens swallowed heavily. "Prim?" he called out in a weak voice. Primrose slowly turned to face him. Her eyes were cold and empty, as if all of the life and emotion had left her body. Her chin and lower jaw were stained with even more of Silent's spilled blood, making her look almost like a zombie from some macabre painting. Then, with slow, jerky steps, she began to trudge for the barrier. Lens shrank back, his heart going wild against his ribs. "Prim, hey, stay back," he stammered out. The vacant, hollow look in the blood-stained fool's eyes was enough to trigger a deep-seated fight-or-flight response. Before he could stop himself, his horn flared with light, and the barrier solidified just before Prim would have passed through it. She paused at the edge of the light, her eyes widening. "Lens?" she breathed out in empty confusion. Lens wilted at that, his heart being flooded with regret. He looked down, his ears lowering. "Are you in there, Primrose?" he asked after a moment, trying to keep the fearful stammer out of his voice. He lifted his eyes to look into hers, silently pleading with her. Primrose stared back at him for several seconds before looking down at her hooves. The color steadily drained from her face, and she let out a mortified gasp. The light slowly began to come back into her eyes as they misted over. She reached a hoof up to cover her mouth, stifling a horrified sob. She looked back up to Lens, tears rolling freely down her cheeks.
"Lens, I'm so sorry. I wasn't trying to. I couldn't stop,"
she babbled out in a trembling voice. She reached out and touched her hoof to the barrier, sniffling.
"Please let me in. Please."
Lens eyed her for a few seconds, his own heart withering at the sight. With a quiet sigh, he dropped the barrier, allowing her to approach. She looked up at it as it dispersed, before dragging herself over to be at his side. Her eyes locked onto Scarlet's body. Lens lifted a foreleg and guided her into a tight hug against his side, resting his chin on her head to impart as much comfort as he could.
"It's okay,"
he whispered, closing his eyes.
It's okay now. It's over. He's gone.
Primrose sniffled.
I killed him.
She choked out, her entire body trembling.
I wasn't supposed to kill him. I never wanted to kill anyone. But I just couldn't stop myself. I was so angry and...
Shh. Lens shushed her as she babbled on and on.
Shh, 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 shh. It's okay. It's all right. I've got you.
Primrose finally leaned against him and returned to the hug, burying her face into his chest for and openly sobbing. Lens did what he could to soothe and comfort her, but in truth he wasn't faring much better than the poor, broken child in his hooves. His eyes fell on Scarlet once again, heart clenching in his chest.
We forgive you, Scarlet, for everything.
Lens thought to himself, closing his eyes.
I just hope you are able to forgive yourself in the end.
The two stayed like that for what felt like an eternity. The storm clouds that had gathered overhead slowly began to clear away, as if the five, or whatever force constituted as godly in this world Lens supposed, had decided there had been enough pain for one night. Not a single drop of rain fell on that mountain valley, and soon enough the pale glow of the full moon returned in all its glory. A chilly breeze washed over them, making Lens shudder, even as he used his body to shield Primrose from the cold. His ears perked up at the sound of hooves approaching through the grass. He looked over, finding Flurryheart drawing closer. The alicorn's eyes were set on Scarlet's body, a deeply sympathetic frown on her face.
I'm sorry I didn't come sooner,
she whispered quietly once she was close enough.
Don't be sorry,
Lens dismissed in an equally hushed tone, with a slow shake of his head.
Your people had to take priority over a bunch of strangers. I can't fault you for that. Had I come sooner,
Flurry insisted adamantly,
maybe I could have done something to save her. But as it is...
Her horn lit up with a golden light. Lens and Primrose watched as Scarlet's body lit up to match, and he held his breath. Primrose, on the other hoof, did not seem to be optimistic. Flurry's eyes widened.
She's alive,
she muttered in awe. Lens blinked in surprise, his heart steadily beating harder against his chest as a newfound hope sprung into life within him.
She is?
He asked, leaning forward slightly.
Well then, can you save her? I've done everything I can, but it's not enough.
Flurry frowned as she took in Scarlet's injuries. After a moment, she sighed and shook her head.
I'm so sorry, but no. I can't. She's too far gone. My healing spells are powerful, but there's a limit to what I can heal. Her body suffered extensive internal and external trauma, not to mention all of the blood she's lost. Maybe if I had all my strength, I could pull something, but I've used most of my power healing changelings inside. I just don't have the energy left to heal injuries this severe.
Lens's hope died with the next beat of his heart upon Flurry's conclusion. He looked down at Scarlet, his heart feeling heavy with longing.
So, she's lost?
He breathed out, holding Primrose even closer. Flurry closed her eyes.
I wish there was more I could do. I owe it to all of you for bringing us the lamp and helping to protect my home.
Lens sighed and looked away. His composure was starting to crack and break down. His vision was fogging over with tears, and his voice was beginning to tremble with emotion.
It's fine,
he mumbled in defeat.
Don't blame yourself. She can die knowing she gave her all for what she believed in. I know she'll find peace.
Suddenly, Primrose tore away from his grasp. Lens blinked and turned to see her propping her hooves up on Scarlet's body, her eyes glowing green as she channeled magic. She looked imploringly up at Flurry.
Please, can't you just try?
She asked in desperation. Flurry blinked, leaning back.
Primrose, I don't want to give you false hope,
she said reluctantly. Primrose shook her head wildly in defiance.
There has to be something we can do. She can't die like this. I won't let her.
Lens sighed, looking down. As much as he wanted to side with Primrose on this, he knew already that it was a losing battle. Flurry was exhausted and Scarlet was too far gone. He timidly lifted a hoof and reached out to grab Primrose's shoulder.
Prim, please, don't.
Primrose spun and smacked his hoof away.
No! I'm not letting this be the end!
She screamed at him. She wiped a hoof over her misting eyes.
She's given up everything for us! We can't just sit here and let her die! We have to try something! Anything!
Lens sighed and withdrew his hoof. He opened his mouth to say something, to try to console her, to try to convince her it wasn't possible, but he just couldn't find the words. He couldn't stand to shatter her heart like that, not after everything she had already been through tonight. But at the same time, he couldn't bring himself to lie and say that they could pull it off. He was caught in a trap. It was either break her heart by telling her it was impossible, or let her heart be broken in a whole different way by telling her a comforting lie mere moments before it would be disproven. A conundrum no parental figure should ever have to face.
Scarlet raised our foal for years,
Lens thought with a quiet sigh.
If she could speak right now, I wonder what she would say about this.
Primrose's ears slowly lowered when Lens didn't say anything. She gave a frustrated shout before spinning back around to Flurry.
I don't care if we fail,
she said desperately.
But we have to try. I owe her that much at least.
Flurry looked down, closing her eyes. For a short while, she didn't say a word. Then she opened her eyes and gave a thoughtful hum.
Actually, there might be a way,
she whispered. Lens stared at her in bewilderment.
Huh?
Flurry rose to her hooves and stepped around Scarlet's body until she was next to him.
I'm exhausted, yes, but maybe if you two lend me your magic, I can pull her back from the brink.
Primrose gasped.
You can do that?
Flurry nodded.
I can, although I've never done it for something like this. I need to make it perfectly clear to both of you, right here and now, that there is a very real probability that this won't work. If we do this, you will both be very drained for a while, and there is a very high chance that even if I can bring her back from the brink, her injuries may still claim her in the end. You need to be ready for that possibility. Do you understand?
Primrose nodded without hesitation.
Yes, I do. What do I need to do?
Flurry smiled at the fool's eagerness before turning to Lens.
What about you? I'll need every scrap of power I can get if this is going to work.
Lens reached up to adjust his glasses, only to find that they were not there. He grimaced and set his hoof down.
Scarlet Frost is the most important mare in my life. She gave up everything to save us.
He whispered quietly, closing his eyes.
I love her. I love her with all of my heart. She means the world to me. If giving up some of my magic means saving her life, then consider it done. Take as much as you need.
Flurry placed a hoof over his chest.
I'm glad to hear it. Focus on that, both of you. Think about how much she means to you, how much you love her, everything about her that you find endearing or likable, every happy memory you have. Use those feelings and draw on all of it. And we might just save her.
Lens nodded and did as he was told, casting his mind back. He thought of the day he had first met Scarlet, how he had been instantly stricken by her fiery personality and imposing beauty. He thought of how she had slowly but surely warmed up to him as he regaled her with story after story, trivial fact after trivial fact about the world around them. He recalled how she had brought him with her on patrol one night after an especially bloody battle, before bringing them both to a stop by the side of a pond. He remembered how she had told him how much she was tired of all of the fighting, and how deeply she had come to care for him. He remembered how his heart had soared at the admission of affection, and how it had hammered in his chest when they had taken each other in the grass by the water's edge, entangled in one another's hooves. He remembered how much he had missed her when they were separated. He remembered wondering every so often if she would ever come to see him, or if he would ever see her again at all. He remembered the day she had finally turned up on his doorstep, and everything that had happened after. Hearing about Crystal Clear, experiencing the attack on his home, Primrose's nearly fatal injury, their time on the Apple family's farm, their dance under the moonlight in New Canter. Her face looking down on his. Through it all, cracked and broken as she sometimes became, there was never any doubt that the fiery, passionate mare he had fallen so deeply in love with was still in there, fighting with ferocity unmatched behind those amethyst eyes to protect the ones she loved, to keep them happy and safe. I love you, Scarlet, he thought to himself when he heard Flurry's horn lighting up with magic. Please, come back to us. We still have a quiet life to live. He felt a tug on his magic. For a moment, he instinctively went to resist, but soon relaxed, allowing the power to flow out of him without restraint. And Primrose needs a mother.